In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Coexist, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. True security isn't found in a paycheck, but in trusting your ability to create value no matter the circumstances. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into three transformative themes: the power of leverage in business and life, embracing AI to stay competitive, and the mindset shift from employee to entrepreneur. Our guest today is Spencer Lowe, an entrepreneur who built an 8-figure consulting firm without external funding and has mastered the art of leverage. As the founder of SOLVD.cloud and host of Lesson in Leverage, Spencer specializes in amplifying success through technology, labor, and financial strategy. From door-to-door sales at 12 years old to consulting for major companies like US Bank and Bill.com, Spencer's journey is a testament to the power of strategic decision-making and calculated risk-taking. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let everyone know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Mr. Spencer Lowe, welcome on a Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me, Sam.
It's lovely seeing you here, and your journey as a lifelong entrepreneur is something that our audience will get a lot of value of. To kick us off, please tell us more about Solve.cloud.
Yeah, Solve.cloud, we help automate businesses, specifically using Salesforce and generative AI. And that can sound a little vague. So I think it's important for people to understand, Peter Diamandis, who's a really incredible futurist, has said that in the next now 3 to 4 years, he said this a few years ago, every business will either be automated with AI or will be extinct. And so what we're trying to do, we're on a mission to help companies take their business into the AI era and automate themselves so that they have what we would call a hybrid labor force, digital labor and human labor working together, really synergistically, really comfortably. And so that's the mission that we're on with Solve.cloud. And we use Salesforce.com. We help people with Salesforce.com to do that. But at the same time, we also are doing a lot more in generative AI to help people get to that level of automation that's going to keep them competitive and not have them just get, replaced and put on the sidelines or out of business.
Beautiful. Love that. And your eyes for business and your interest towards business, started at a very, very young age. I'd love to start with the early hustle, because it's there's quite a lot of lessons from mowing lawns to door. You started your journey, it seemed like, at 12 years old. Tell me more about how you got in business in the first place this young, and why was it so meaningful to do so?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll give you a little backstory since we've got a lot of time today. Let me give you some backstory. So I was born in the Philippines. My dad was in the military, and so he was stationed in the Philippines. So I was born in the Philippines in 1989, and in 1991, I believe it was, Mount Pinatubo erupted, which was the second largest volcanic eruption in the last 100 years. So 10 miles of mountainside exploded. And we were right underneath that at Clark Air Base. We were right next to that. And so as it became clear that the volcano was going to erupt, they evacuated us. And my dad was in the security police, so he had to stay, and he actually closed down the air base. It was never reopened for the U.S. We gave it to the Philippine government afterwards. But as he was closing down the air base, my mom had 6 kids. I'm the youngest at a year and a half. And so she has 6 kids. We all had to put our stuff in like a trash bag. We could bring one bag. And we were gone. And we were, from sleeping in fields to on an aircraft carrier to random places over in other islands. They took us all over the place. First they took us over to another island where they're like, you're going to be safe over here. But a typhoon came in, picked up all the ash, got it wet, and dumped it right on us on that other island. I mean, it was a crazy experience. And for 6 weeks, my mom didn't even know. This is before the age of cell phones and the internet. So my mom didn't even know if my dad was still okay, if, how everything was going back there. There's very little communication that she could get from him. And so she has these 6 kids, and it was just chaos. It was, the epitome of a real emergency. We didn't know where our next meal was going to come from, when we'd get a shower next. And so looking back through her journals on that time, I mean, I admire the way that she was able to keep us safe. Now, what this did, the reason I share this story is not just because it's kind of interesting, but it's because it formed, in my opinion, it was part of a story that formed how my dad saw his career. My dad had been in the military. He really wanted to provide for his family, but then he went through this experience and he was all about emergency preparedness. He grew up really poor in California, got in the military, and this experience then led to him doing all of these speeches about, how do you prepare for emergencies? How do you make sure that when they happen, you navigate them appropriately? And so we had, all of these places we'd go speak about how you have your 72-hour kits, and what do you do when the emergency happens, and what's the role of faith in God in this, and all these different things. And so my parents became very focused on how they could do the right thing for their family and keep us safe. And when my dad got out of the military, at that point, he was a hospital administrator. So he finally migrated out of security police into hospital administration. And when he got out, he went to work for a company that was, Mercy Methodist Hospital, that he was a hospital administrator there. And he was doing a unique role because he wasn't just doing hospital administration. He was doing, he was training residents as well on the business side of things. And so it was a role that didn't really exist before, but it was saving the hospital millions of dollars for him to do that. And in his first week, they said, we're going to hire this consultant, since we don't have anyone here to really teach you your job. We're going to hire this consultant to come in and have him, train you and make sure you know what you're doing. At the end of the week, the consultant said, he knows more than I do. In fact, I'd hire him right now. In fact, do you want to come join my company, start your own business, and consult? Because you can make a lot more money. You probably make $400,000 doing that, as opposed to whatever they're going to pay you here, maybe 120 at the time, which was a lot of money, back then. But he could have made way more money as a consultant. And he said, you know what? I'm going to stay here because they have a pension. I'm going to stay here where it's safe. And so he didn't go do the consulting. He was there for 9.5 years. And at 10 years, he got to the next level, which was the real, start to be real good level of the pension. And the new CEO was there. And the CEO said, man, why are we paying this guy? You know what? We're going to go ahead and lay him off as part of these layoffs. And so he got laid off right before that. And so he didn't get that huge pension that he was hoping for. He got a small one, but not that the big one that he was really hoping to add to his military pension. And so that safety that he made that decision on wasn't real. The safety wasn't real because at the end of the day, the company had to do what was best for them. And so he was left out on the side. And so at that point, he said, you know what? Why the heck? Now I have nothing to lose. I'm going to go see if I can actually start a business with this guy. Went back, did consulting, immediately 3 to 4x his income. Became, after that, 2 of the companies he was working with merged, and they hired him to be the executive over the merger. And he built this incredible career. And our lifestyle, I as a kid am watching this, and our lifestyle shifted dramatically. What had money to do, the restaurants we could go to, the travel we could enjoy. As the bottom of 6 kids on a military budget, our trips were basically camping every year. We would go out an hour or 2 drive, and we'd be out camping. That was a vacation. Now we actually could go on cruises. We could go have these other experiences. We could travel places. And so it was such a huge shift for me. And I thought, okay, here's my dad, incredibly smart guy, incredibly hardworking. But it took him until he was in his late 50s to make this kind of, what if I could do that a little earlier? And so that was the first piece that really set some of my focus, was this idea of seeing how much his life changed. The second piece was my parents didn't give me money because we didn't have a lot of money growing up until I was in my late teens, 17, 18. They would give me $20 a month, and I had to manage my own money. And so I had to buy my own clothes, my own school supplies. Like, that money wasn't for going out to the movies. That wasn't like allowance play money. That was, I had to keep a ledger on the computer. I had to keep track of where every dollar went. I had to donate to my church. I had to make sure that I was paying taxes. Like, I had to keep track of everything, and so they made me really be responsible for my own money. And I realized just how little money that was pretty quick. So at 14 years old, at 12 years old, I wanted an RC car. And I realized, okay, if I want this RC car, I'm going to have to save for like 9 years to get it. So Dad, This doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be a grown man. I'm not going to get this RC car as a kid. I want it right now as a kid. And so he said, you know what, I'll buy you a lawnmower, but you have to go mow the lawns, and then you can earn more money. You can get it faster. And I was like, okay, fair enough. So I went out, convinced 6, 7, 8, 9 of my neighbors to let me mow their lawns. And now I started making real money to save up for this RC car. And that then I realized, all right, I'm working all my Saturdays. So I filled all my free time because I wasn't allowed to work Sundays in my family. We were very religious growing up. And then after school, I didn't really have much time. So I was like, okay, I filled all the time I can. This is the most money I can make if I'm mowing lawns. What's better than that? And so at 14, that's when I finally realized I saw this opportunity to sell door to door. So I started selling newspapers door to door, started making even more money, then started working nights selling door to door. And so it became a thing where, I was making in about 3 hours a night, I'd make about $100 doing door to door sales. And so that was really good money back then, especially at my age. And so I was very excited about that. And that's what really started to build this entrepreneurial bug in me. So it's a long way, a lot of background to give you to say that it was formed off a combination of seeing that true security with my dad. True security was when he went out on his own and trusted his own skills and his own ability to deliver. That was true security. Security was not trusting one company and hoping they'd just take care of you, hoping they'd have the pension for you. True security was becoming so valuable that you could go out on your own and have knowledge that you could always provide. And the second thing was, because I didn't have money as a kid and I had to go earn it myself, I got addicted to this feeling of like, man, if I go find a way to make more, if I go find a way to deliver more value, then I can actually have more now. And that I got really addicted to. And so it led into a whole career of door-to-door sales that I did for 8 years. Then I went out and served a mission. I grew up in the Mormon church. And so for 2 years, they send out their kids from 19 to 21 to go teach people about Jesus. So I did that for 2 years, lived in France and Switzerland and Luxembourg, learned French, spent a lot of time on that. But it's basically door-to-door sales of Jesus in Europe, which is pretty challenging. And then got back from that and went right back into sales for a friend of mine who her dad was an artist and he had a gallery director quit in Sausalito, just outside of San Francisco. And so I was like, all right, I'll go reopen your gallery. So he mailed me a key. I drove in, I opened the store and I started selling art and figuring out how to run a store. And so once I had that back up and running and hired someone to replace me and got them trained, about 6 months later, I left and I was like, you know what? I don't want to do sales my whole life because I'm working all the times that times that people would be social. I'm working nights and weekends. And that's when, if I want to go on dates, and at some point, man, I'd like to get married, I'm going to have to find a way to free up this time. And so, I ended up at college and learning technical skills, but we don't have to jump straight to that right now, but I just wanted to lay down that context of that's kind of the foundation, my childhood that really created this entrepreneurial drive in me, was realizing those things.
Right. Beautiful. And thank you for doing that. That's incredible background for the rest of the conversations. And truly, every time I see a hustler like you are, because you're definitely a hustler, and that story proved it to us. But every hustle obviously teach us something, right? Whether if it's how to sell, whether if it's how to build, simply basically how to keep going, perhaps. But one thing that was fascinating within your journey was how you learned from actually both your parents, which has been proven to be extremely resilient and an extremely hard worker. When you're growing up in these environments where you see your parents doing the absolute most they can for you to try, for you to have a better chance perhaps at life, I'll go as far as saying it this way, how does that basically shape your own work ethic, and how perhaps would you say that you learned from them that skill set first before you just build on top of it with your own experience?
Yeah, I think, your parents, you can't even measure how incredibly valuable and important having good parents is. At the same time, I think some people I've met that are super successful had no parents or really bad parents. So one of the things that we do in life is we create the meaning around something. Sometimes we have great parents and we say, I want to be just like them. We have bad parents or no parents and say, I'm never going to be that. And so it's so important to master this ability of assigning meaning to things, because if what meaning we put on it becomes our narrative inside our head. And as Jim Rohn said, you have to stand guard at the door of your mind. What goes into your mind, what you say to yourself becomes your reality. And so for my case, having such loving parents, having parents that worked so hard. My mom had 6 kids. She was constantly serving not just us, but the whole community. I'd come home and smell like cinnamon rolls. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I love these cinnamon rolls. I walk in and there's nothing in the kitchen. She's like, oh, I made those for the new family in the church, right? I just took those over to so-and-so who lost a loved one. I thought, couldn't you make some for me? But the that she was setting did stick with me. That she was constantly looking out for others in the community, constantly looking out for other people and serving. And my dad, also very service oriented, but was completely dedicated to taking care of his family all the way back to when he was a child. And his father was struggling with his health, so he couldn't work. And so him and all his siblings would work and give all the money to their mom. And so he would, go out in the prune fields and pick up plums and, all the things that he went through, and he showed as an example, certainly did have an impact. But I think what's really important for the audience to remember is that we get to choose the meaning. We get to choose what it means. So it's not a disadvantage. If some of the people that I know that have done the most that I admire and that I am jealous of, they had much harder childhoods than me. And so they are so much hungrier. They have so much drive that for me, I'm just like, man, I don't know if I can get to that gear. I know I can work hard. I know I've hustled a lot, but I'm happy with my life. There's some people that have something to prove on a level that you can't get without enormous pain, without enormous background. And so whatever your situation is, be grateful for it. Be grateful for the situation because it's laying the foundation. If it's extremely painful, you get to choose what it means so that you can now do something that someone who didn't go through that wouldn't even have the opportunity to, couldn't even possibly understand what you have felt and that drive that you will have. And if you're going through something amazing, if you've had an incredible example by your parents, be grateful for it because you're going to learn lessons and see the joy that they were able to create with the values that they gave you. And so it's going to be so easy for you to transition into modeling that and living that if you choose to let it mean that. So it's all at the moment that we decide about the meaning that everything gets unlocked.
Exactly. What we found neurobiologically is meaning drive all actions, right? So to the thing that you were, to the thing that you desire, everything is driven by meaning. And in assigning that meaning in this resilience mindset that you have, right, this kind of like either I win or I learn type of process is so important. And you're completely right. Some of the most successful people that I know, billionaires, understood that concept very well. That's basically from either their past were basically very difficult, or there was some type of aha moment when they said, you know what, let me just keep going. Let me just go to the full extent of what that vision can be. And there's something quite admirable with that. And same thing with some of what you were doing. Kind of like the obviously the success story of Solved.cloud is quite exceptional as well. I was diving deeper into kind of like the bootstrap phase, the very, very beginning of you basically setting it up. Can you perhaps discuss the challenges and also perhaps the triumph as well, the early triumph of making sure that basically saw that AI became this company that we know today?
Yeah. So, I mean, I knew I had that entrepreneurial spirit from my childhood that we talked about. And so when I was done selling and I thought, what's next? I talked to a good friend of mine, Parker, and we grew up together. We're really good friends. And he was out at college and he's like, look, there's a bunch of people out here. It's fun. But I had a 1.9 GPA in high school. I barely graduated. My senior year, I had to take like 4 or 5 extra courses to read as retakes just to graduate. I never took school seriously. I felt like it was a waste of my time. I felt like they didn't take my time seriously. I show up in class, the first 10 minutes, we weren't doing anything. The last 10 minutes, we weren't doing anything. And then you give me an hour of homework to take home. I'm like, you're wasting my time here. I got 10 minutes between classes. I got 10 minutes at the start, 10 minutes at the end. That's a half hour right there that's wasted. I could have done the homework here. So I'll tell you what, down in class, I'll do what I can do during the class and whatever else, I'm not doing it. And so I just wasn't willing to go waste what little time I had in the evenings to spend with my friends and to have fun. I was like, I'm not going to waste that on work that you should have taught me when I was at school. And even now I put my kids in schools that don't give homework and only teach in the classroom. And I'm like, respect their time right now. So that was kind of where I was at as a kid, was like, I wasn't super school oriented. So when he told me, hey, come out here and let's be in college, I'm like, dude, college isn't for me. I'm not a school guy. I'm the guy who was selling door to door and making money making more than a lot of adults as a teenager. Sales is the answer to everything. Sales is how you make money. You don't need all these other skills. And, but I realized, I thought, he's saying that it works. I'm going to go out there and just test it out. And so I quit my job at the gallery. I made sure I had replaced myself so that, Rodney would have, a good way to keep that place running without me. And so then I sold all my possessions, what little stuff I had, packed up into my car, and I didn't have any plan. I drove out to Utah. He was at BYU out here, the college out here. I drove out, didn't have an acceptance, didn't have a place to live, just drove out in my car and was like, let's figure this thing out. And so started taking classes as an unadmitted student. So they'll let you take night classes or classes up at their Salt Lake Center when you're not yet a student. And a lot of universities let you do that. But you can't take all the classes. You can only take certain classes. So I was taking generals. And once I got straight A's on that for, probably a year. And then I applied as a transfer student using their own credits. And so I was like, all right, look here, I'm a transfer student. I have straight A's at your university. I've been working full-time the whole time while in school full-time. So I'm sure I can succeed here. They'll let me in, and they let me in. So it's a pretty competitive university. I was pretty surprised, but they let me in. So then I got into university and I was like, all right, I was thinking I'd go into maybe business strategy because that's what some of my friends, including Parker, had done. And they seemed to be on really good career trajectories and have good options. And they were talking to the Bains and the Boston consulting groups and all that. I'm like, wow, maybe that's like a really respectable career. And so I start, down that path. And one of the prerequisite courses was this IS 201 course. And Professor Mark Keith, love this man because he opened my eyes to technology. And I was always passionate about technology, but I didn't really think that it was what I wanted to do as a career. And his course really gave us a bunch of exposure. And this was now going on, 10, 11 years ago, something like that, somewhere in there. I'd have to go do the math, but probably 10 years ago. That in that course, he was showing us, machine learning and predictive stuff. And I was like, well, this is crazy. This is really powerful stuff. And so I want to build on this. This is what I want to add. So I thought I'll add the technical skills to pair with my soft skills and my sales skills and see what I can do with this. So I changed my direction, instead went into the IS program. And back when I was there, BYU had the number 4 program in the nation. It was very highly rated. And so I was able to go through that, and they just gave incredible skills. It had an integrated master's option. So I did that. So I ended up graduating with a bachelor's and a master's. But while I was in school, I still had this mindset of like, school is just a tool. It's not the game. My goal is not to be the best student. I want to learn how to go use this in the real world. So I went and got an internship my sophomore year and started working full time. And I was started at a company that did software asset management and was a developer there. Then realized, I'm like, I don't think I'm a developer. I have the technical skills, but I don't think long-term developer is really the best use of my skills. And so I looked around again and found this company that was doing Salesforce consulting, and went and met with the founder of that company. And they were doing maybe $1.5 million in revenue at the time. They were still very small. But I told him, I said, listen, my goal is to work somewhere where the experience I gained as an intern allows me to start at a higher pay. And I had heard somewhere that only 5% of the graduates for my program started at 100,000 or more. And that's usually in a high cost of living city. And so I was like, cool, that's the standard. I'm going to start at 100K or more, and I'm going to do it in a low cost of living city here in Utah. So I was like, I told him that. I said, listen, I want to make 100K. And instead of being like, oh no, we don't do that, no one makes 100K when they graduate, he just said, okay, great. Here's what I need from you. Here's what you have to make for me. Here's how the math works. You go build this revenue, you lead projects in this way, you get to this level of skill, then that's what I can pay you. And I'm like, oh, great. And just the fact that he didn't see me bringing that up as a problem, and instead was like, let's work together on how you get there. I was like, this is the guy I want. An incredible mentor to this day. I love this man. His name's Hans. And so I said, okay. So I start working there, and I worked there for a few years while I was getting my degree. It was full-time. Ended up going on full-time as a salary position before I even graduated, and was leading projects, and then stayed there for up to about a year after I graduated, and got to a point where I realized, I'm like, I can do this on my own. My team was accounting for 90% of our growth and basically all of the profits for this company that had now grown to about $8 million in revenue a year. And I thought, okay, I know I can get back here. I just have to go prove I can go from 0 to 1 million. And the thing is, I've got a sales background. Like I got to believe I can go sell that first million. So I had watched all the, learnings and mistakes that Hans and the team had made. And I had a seat at the table for some of the leadership conversations to be able to see some of how those were made. And so I thought, I've got a huge advantage. And at the time, the market for Salesforce consulting was growing on average at 24% a year. And if you could get an investment where you're going to get an average return of 24% a year, you take that investment. So I thought, okay, all I have to do is be average in this market and get enough customers to pay me to replace my salary. And so I went out and I did. I mean, the short of it is I decided I was going to start my own business, told my boss, said I gave him infinite notice. I said, I'll stay here as long as you need to transition all the projects to make sure everything's in a good place. I don't want to burn this bridge at all. You've been really good to me. I'm also going to go compete, but I won't compete directly with you. If you're ever involved on a deal, I'll walk away from it. I won't do anything to step on your toes. I'm just going to go, but I'm going to build on, my own practice. And he was very supportive. And so, I left, I started that practice, and for the first 6 months, man, I had serious doubts. I was posting content on LinkedIn. I was trying to get the word out. I was calling everyone I know. I was doing direct sales. I was everything I could do to try to get traction. And what I learned really quickly is, like, no matter how good you are, early on, people don't know if they can trust your business. People don't know if you're going to be around. Even if they trust you, it's like, well, what if I sign a contract with you and you just go out of business in 3 months? Or you just, I got to see that you have some staying power. So a lot of people were kind of wait and see, like, can you sustain? Because we like you, we know that you're good, but like, we don't want to hire you and have you just disappear. So,
Tell me more about that phase, by the way, that first 6 months now that you're describing, self-doubts. How does that intertwine with the urgency of you going forward?
Yeah. So there's a couple things to understand. When I left my job, one of the things I believe everyone should do is have really tight personal finances, because it gives you way more options. So I had about 9 months to a year runway, depending on how strict I was with my spending. Knowing that I could leave my job and I wouldn't need to make any money for 9 months to a year. So that gave me options, because I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I'd saved up good money, and I knew that I could live off my savings. So, and that's without even touching my investments. That was just emergency fund savings that were sitting on the sidelines. So I'm like, I have time, but before I decided to leave to start my own company, I was, nervous. And I thought, what am I really scared of? Why is this so scary? And the answer was, well, I have a second kid on the way. I have one kid now, and my wife depends on me, and so do my kids. I've got this house we bought that I got to be able to pay for. And so I sat down with my wife and I was like, listen, I think what I'm really scared of ultimately is, if I don't succeed, would you leave me? If we lost everything, if I lost the house, if I lost every possession we had to sell, and we moved into your parents' basement for temporarily to get back on our feet, would that be it? And she's like, no, absolutely not. She's like, I'm all in with you. I don't care about the money. And so if you want to start a business, I'll support you. And if we lose all our stuff, we lose all our stuff. But if you fail, you got to go back and get a job. And so she's like, if you do fail, then you got to go get a job and take care of us. So that, she's like, I just got to know that you're not going to ask me to live in my parents' basement for 20 years while you try to make a business work. So I was like, okay, that's fair. And so I said, listen, I'm never going to let that happen. But I had to know that if it did happen, that my worst fears wouldn't come true. And so once I confronted that, then I was like, all right, now I feel like I've got the ability to go pull the trigger on this. Because I mean, the expenses were high. I was going to have my house, which was expensive. We bought it kind of at the very top of our means, knowing that long term it would get much. It ended up being a great decision, but we had bought about as expensive as a house as you should ever buy. And on top of that, when I left, I was going to have to pay Cobra for my health insurance out of pocket for my, wife and my son that was about to be born in the next 6 months. And so that was like $1,800 a month. And so it was just, I had a lot of expenses. That's all before I buy any food. And so I was like, maybe we get 9 months out of this, maybe a year if we find ways to cut costs. But it was going to be tight. And the other thing was, I wasn't sure initially that I was going to start a consulting firm. When I left, I was a little burnt out on consulting. So I thought maybe I'll try a product company. So when I first left, this is a part of the story I actually don't tell a lot. When I first left, I started looking at options to build products. And I actually built a product. I built an employee engagement product that lives natively in Salesforce that could be used. And we sold it to a couple companies, and I had a partner in it. And within a couple months, I realized this is not a long-term business for me. And one of the biggest reasons was I realized just how long it would take a product without raising funding to actually pay the lifestyle that I had, or even pay me the salary I needed. And so I was doing the math on it. I'm like, this is a long runway. And I'm like, that's not what I want. I've always been driven by being able to at least have a decent lifestyle. And so I'm like, knowing the opportunity cost of I could start a consulting firm, it would make lots of money, be highly profitable, and I could do that now. And I have the skill set for it. And I just spent 4.5 years learning everything it takes to go do that. What am I doing? So I told my partner, I said, hey, you keep the product, you run the company. I'll let go of any and all equity. I don't need you to pay me anything, even though I built the entire product and found us the customers that we had. I was like, you take it. And so he did. He took it. And I then turned and was like, all right, now I've got to start focusing on making money. And so this was now, I quit my job in October 1st of 2018. And then I had just gone through the holidays and had all this holiday spend and all that, and so now it's January 1st, going into January 1st, I was like, all right, now I got to turn the jets on. Like I'm down to 7 months and I've got to make this work. And so I've got to get clear. I can't be telling people, oh, I've got this product. And I'm also thinking about consulting. It's got to be, this is what I'm doing. So that's where I narrowed my focus in on Solved. I was like, I'm going to build the consulting firm first and get myself healthy financially in terms of having enough money. And then if I want to revisit product, I can think about that later, but I'm going to go build the consulting firm. So January 1st, I really doubled down. And I had been planting seeds before then. I had been taking sales calls before then for services, letting people know that I was doing consulting on the side, but it wasn't my main focus. And I had maybe 2 customers that were like $1,000, $2,000, just nothing. And then got really clear on my message and thought, all right, if I really focus on selling this, I'm going to have traction in the next 2 to 3 months. And I didn't. I went out there. I was posting everything on social. I was calling people. I was doing everything I could do to try to create noise and get in front of people and try to close deals and making my message as clear as I thought it needed to be. And there's just a lot of like, maybe, we'll see, maybe in a few months, we'll get back to you. And I'm like, what is going on? Even people that I was like, you said you'd support me. I had one of my best friends had started a business like mine a year or 2 prior. And so he was one of the people who gave me confidence. And he then, instead of running his own thing, went full time with one of his clients. And they had a bunch of work. And I was like, you told me you'd have work for me. Where's that work at? I need some work. And finally he came through with a little bit of work, but it was like, I'm like, I need some work. And so I had, for a while there, it was pretty scary to start seeing, hey, my finances are dwindling and I don't have very much coming in for the first few months there. And so it just motivated me to work harder. I was putting in 16-hour days. I was calling. I was creating content. I was getting additional certifications just to get credit for all the knowledge I had. I was doing everything I could to try to get momentum. And right around the 3-month point there, so now we're talking maybe March, April-ish of 2019, I'm realizing I'm only a few months away from having no money. And so I go back and I look at it and I go, man, why did I quit my job? What was it that made me quit my job? I'm like, you know what? I just wanted more free time and I was a little overstressed. And then, you know what? Let me go talk to my old boss. So I went back to my mentor and I said, hey, listen, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but there's a little part of me that is wondering if maybe I want to just go back to having a job. This is pretty tough. And so would you be open to, if I only worked 3 days a week, 10-hour days, and then I took the other 2 days off to work on my other side projects, and I want to make more money, and I want to, and so I tried to negotiate a deal. And he said, everything you just said, I would say yes to immediately, but you have to do this for a year before I rehire you, because I can't have you come back and still wonder what if. So he said, if you're going to do this, you either have to succeed or you need to fail all the way. And then we'll talk about bringing you back, which was for him was so wise because I would have had those questions and was a gift to me because what he was really saying is you can't give up this early. And I even if he said yes, I would have wanted a few more months to make it work. But having those little cracks, having those doubts of like, do I really, if I was paid the right amount of money and I had the right work flexibility, I only had to work 3 days a week, maybe I would want to do that. And then I could spend this. Anyways, I was trying to rationalize myself out of the pain. I was trying to talk myself out of the pain because I'd been so quickly successful at everything else. When I did door-to-door sales, my first day I sold 10 accounts. They said, no one's ever done that. And I was like, great, I'm a natural. I'm great. And then I had some struggles in door-to-door sales. I had to rebuild back. Okay, you're not a natural. You just had a ton of passion, which goes a long way. And so I was like, okay, I had to actually build my skills. But it was so valuable to have him say no and to really reorient me and say, look, go all the way, fail, and then come back to me, or succeed. And by the way, I think you're going to succeed. And I was like, okay, that's fair. So I went back and I was taking interviews too for jobs at the time. I got an interview to be an executive of a growing firm that was doing $80 million a year in Salesforce. I was going to run their entire Salesforce practice, core practice. Got all the way to the interview with the CEO. CEO said, man, I love this guy. Like, I think we're going to offer you the job. And I thought I had an offer for $200,000. I was going to more than double my pay and, have performance bonuses on the upside of the company. And I was going to be this executive at such a young age. I was like, listen, I want to build my own business, but man, if I could get that job, that would be such a leap ahead for my career. I'd have to be an idiot to say no. And the offer didn't come. And they ended up deciding just not to hire that position. And so, well, damn, that sucks, and what I realized was the greatest thing to happen to me because, man, if I would have accepted that, I'd have been trapped long-term because it was such a good gig. And so all this is happening at the same time that I'm struggling, I'm getting some revenue, et cetera. And so there's these things that weren't working out. It was all pushing me back towards doing what I thought I needed to do, which was actually build the business. And finally, I got a call from someone that I had reached out to right when I started the business. There was a management consulting firm that they work very closely with Thoma Bravo, which is a big private equity company. And they have these mid-market SaaS businesses that they were acquiring, and they'd often do different M&A activity to do roll-ups with them. And then they take that updated firm and they'd resell it and they make a ton of money, just like private equity does. But a lot of these companies in the mid-market space needed updated systems, which meant implementing Salesforce. And so in my old job, I had worked with this management consulting company on a big project and they ended up getting fired and we were the only ones that stuck around. But I made a personal point to keep personal relationships with each of the management consultants because I thought these guys would be, good people to network with. And so then down the line, when I told them I had my own company, I said, hey, we'll keep you in mind. Well, right around middle of that year, so now I'm getting into month 6, 7, it's really starting to get dicey. And I get a call and they say, hey, we've got a company. They need help with Salesforce. They're in the middle of a merger. Can you help? And I said, absolutely, I can. I would love to help. How much time do they need? Oh, we need this, this, and this. I said, man, for something like that, I mean, they're going to need a lot of time. We probably need a huge retainer, like $9,000 a month, on retainer for the next 12 months. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. No problem. Let me get the CFO to sign it. And I thought, wait, what? That's a huge ass contract in my mind at the time. Now I'm like, this is nothing. But at the time I'm thinking, oh my God, you're about to that's literally how much I need to just be safe. So I'm about to get a safety blanket. And so they sign it. I fly out to Atlanta. I meet with them. And within 2 weeks, I go, this was only for 20 hours a week. You need 48, 50, 60 hours a week. It's going to vary, but it's going to be. So why don't we just convert the contract to time and materials and how many hours I work, I bill you for? And they said, sure. And so now I was making 20 to 30 to 40 grand a month on that one account. And that gave me the base to actually then wait a little bit. And now all the other seeds I had been planting, all the content marketing I was doing on LinkedIn, all the phone calls I had made, all the outreach I was doing, it all started to pay off over time. And I had the staying power. Also, people could see, they could trust that I was going to be around. And so in the next 3 months, so now I'm at months, I don't know, 6 through 9, in that range roughly, everything turned around and we exploded. And so I had tons of work, and I very quickly was like, man, am I going to run this by myself, or am I going to hire someone? And I had an amazing opportunity pop up where a good friend of mine was leaving actually the old company I worked for. And he told me the day before he accepted the offer, he goes, hey, we were playing basketball together. He goes, hey, just so you know, I'm actually leaving. I'm going to accept an offer with Rackspace. And I said, hold, don't do that. I have a non-solicitation agreement, so I can't recruit you. But I know for a fact that's going to be super painful for my buddy Hans if you leave. So let's just see if we can work out a win-win, because I would like to hire you if you're going to leave. And so let's just see what we can do. So I thought about it. I was like, look, I can put together a win-win. So first I had to put together, I said, don't accept the offer yet. Give me a chance to offer you a job. He's like, okay. So I put together a pitch for him and said, if I could offer you this, would you be interested? He said, yes. He's like, I would be interested in that. I said, okay, well, I can't offer you that yet. Let me go talk to Hans. So I went and talked to Hans, and I said, look, Rackspace is poaching your people. This is what's going on. They want Derek. He's doing all these projects. You don't have anyone behind to replace him on. I also would love to work with him. I mean, he's a close friend that I personally recruited to the company when I was here. So why don't you waive the non-solicitation for me to hire him? And I will let him subcontract back to you for the first, as long as you need, 6 months, a year, while you build up another resource and get him in place behind him. And I'll do that for you at like $100 an hour, way less than what it would cost, what I would normally contract our rate at, which was, I think, $200 at the time. So I'm like, I'll give him back to you at an affordable price. You have him do whatever you need for as long as you need. And then when those projects start to ramp down, he'll just work full time for me. But that way you have complete, time to make that migration. And he said, that's great. Let's do it. So we all won. Rackspace lost, which was great, because they went out, they closed their Salesforce practice like 7 months later because they were paying way too much money. And so I was able to hire one of my good friends. He was my first hire, and I was so nervous, even knowing that he was bringing in revenue with him, of he was going to be able to get paid to do some of the work for his old company. But still, it was scary. Man, within a month or two, I was like, oh my gosh, this labor leverage thing is magic. We are building so fast. I need more people. So then me and Derek actually, in college, we were in the same cohort. It was a cohort learning style, meaning you and 3 other people went through all your classes together and did group projects that spanned all the different classes. So we would create software together. So we already worked together for 2.5, 3 years in a cohort, and we knew each other. We were close friends. So it was great working with him, but we also had this guy who was the valedictorian of our class, who was in our cohort, who was an insanely good developer, just an awesome guy. His name was John. And so we reached out to John, and John was kind of at a point of deciding what he wanted to do with his career. And he's like, you guys are building this business. I kind of feel left out. And the stars came together, and we said, great, we'll hire you. Even though he had no experience on Salesforce, I knew he could learn it in months because he was so talented. And he did. He came. And so he joined us. And then it was every month or two a hire, and then even faster than that. And then we just started really picking up the pace of hiring and growing. And so that's where you really started to see, like, okay, this has got a real future. And so, yeah, at the beginning, you don't know. At the beginning, it's hard. It doesn't matter how good you are at sales. I had set a goal. Interestingly enough, as a plug for goal setting, I had written down on a piece of paper my business plan. I said, the first year I'm going to do 300,000. The second year I'm going to do 1.2 million. The third year I'm going to do 3.6 million. And I based that off of what I had seen at my old company and what I thought was reasonable based on that. I was like, I think I could do it twice as fast as we did in my old company because I have all the learnings from there. Not that I'm better than them, but I got to watch it all. So I'm doing it for the second time. I should be able to double my speed. And so the short of it was, we did 350K that first year. We did 1.2 and change million the second year. We did 3.6 and change the third year. And we hit exactly those targets. And that's something to be said for goal setting, for writing those goals down and then really driving to them. And so, that was, an incredible part of the journey, was just breaking through and realizing, hey, this is real. and we've got a real business here. And know that instead of being scared, because early on it's scary no matter what.
Oh, it is. It is 100%. And one thing that is very interesting, and you mentioned the magic words leverage, which I mean we can do a 1 hour conversation on leverage only, but it seems like in the center of your philosophy, leverage is the ultimate tools, and you just basically explain labor leverage, but you were always had this mindset of, hey, if I can replace myself in a profitable way, obviously I should always do it. That is so key to any growth, both in personal life and also in business. When you're thinking about outside of obviously labor leverage, you're also talking about technology leverage. When you're thinking about what it means to be modern business these days, and the fact that technology plays such a big role for the people that maybe are quite scared of basically investing into leverageable sources for the added stress, for the added cost most of the time, basically on a short-term basis. What's typically, how do you angle the decision making towards, well, actually this piece of leverage or this opportunity for leverage is a great one, we should act upon it right now, instead of, you know what, let's do that later on. How do you manage basically expectation within yourself and your team to make sure that you fully engage with leverage opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, my fundamental belief, and this has been this way for quite some time now, I think that beyond a certain level of education, intelligence, and work ethic, that everyone needs a certain amount of education, a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of work ethic as a minimum sort of table stakes to be successful. Beyond that, what my experience has taught me is that the difference in output and outcomes is almost entirely attributable after that to leverage. And so you have people that are smarter than me, working harder than me, that do not make the money I make. You have people that are more educated than me, that are smarter than me, that don't get the outcomes I get. And by the same token, there's people that are not as smart as me or don't work as hard as I do, who are getting bigger outcomes than I am. And that is because beyond that minimum threshold of those three things, they understand and have learned to wield leverage more efficiently and more effectively than I have. Now, with that base belief, like your beliefs are really, really important. That's why I start with them usually, is because if you believe the wrong thing, then you won't learn the right lesson. So having the right belief set to start allows you to learn the right lesson. So if I know that what I'm looking for are the skills around leverage, what I'm looking for is what difference that makes in output, then I can find that thing, or I can start to see those things. So now when we look at like how do we use leverage, or how do we make decisions, you're asking, like, on our side, I think it's important to see that leverage is not a shortcut. So there's a lot of things people will call leverage, and really what they're calling, what they're referring to is a perceived shortcut. There are not shortcuts to success. I'll give you an example. I have a good amount of crypto. I could lever that up on margin. I think that's the stupidest thing you could do. Personally, I'm a leverage guy. All I care about, all I think about is gaining leverage. So why am I not levering my crypto? Well, because crypto is extremely volatile. And with a highly volatile asset, you're going to have big swings. And the most important part of crypto, like what produces the returns today and will for probably the next 10 years at least, is the increase in value of the asset, which means what matters, getting to what really matters for winning in crypto, is that you don't lose the asset and that you have the right assets. That's how you win in crypto. And then you hold long-term and you withstand all the volatility. That's how you win in crypto. You believe in the asset class, you buy the ones that have staying power, and you do not sell them. And you make sure that portfolio has a nice structure, which for me is actually very simple and stays in some of the most prominent coins. It's heavily weighted towards Bitcoin. But nonetheless, the point there is, if I know what matters, then I know when to apply leverage and when not. Leverage can be extremely risky. And so if I'm applying leverage to something to try to get there faster, which is what people do, they go, oh, I'm in a hurry. Why are you in a hurry? Crypto, if you've got a balanced portfolio, you're likely to get 30 to 60% returns annualized for the next 5 to 10 years. So Just don't watch it, hold it, know that you have the right asset allocation up front, and then sit on it for 10 years and then look at it and go, wow, I made 30 to 60% a year, which means I doubled my money. At 30%, I doubled my money in every 2.5 years, basically. Faster than that, but the point is less than 2.5 years, every 2 years, roughly. 2 to 2.5. Pardon. So with that in mind, that's fast. You're already in an asset that's highly volatile and thus is growing really fast. There's not a lot of places you double your money every 2.5 years. So with that being said, don't lever it up and try to go faster. What are you doing? You're already going fast, and it already has plenty of risk baked into it as a more volatile and risky asset. So you don't put all your net worth in it. At least, again, this is my philosophy. If you have anything to lose, you're not going to put all your net worth in it, but you're going to put a good amount. You're going to let it ride, and you're not going to lever it, because losing the coin is losing the game. So that you have to understand the rules of the game. I think most people misuse leverage and in fact lose at life because they have problems, and their problems are created at the moment of decision about what things mean and what assumptions, beliefs, and limitations exist. So in order to have a problem, I have to make a decision that the problem exists, and that decision has a lot of inputs. And so I make a decision that says, here's what this means, and here's all the constraints and limitations, and now I have a problem. And so the easiest way to not have problems is to revisit what things mean and revisit what the assumptions and limitations are. And if I remake that decision in a healthier way, all of a sudden I don't have a problem. So I don't want to get too distracted on that, but this is another really core belief and something that I teach my staff, because then when I'm looking at leverage, if I'm using it as a shortcut because I think I need to move faster, I'm probably going to make mistakes. So that would be the easiest rule of thumb I would give people, is if you're using leverage as a shortcut to believe that it will, it's the get rich quick scheme, it's the way to go super fast. That is not the right way to think about leverage. The right way to think about leverage is when you have a high degree of mastery in an area, you can move from reacting to things to anticipating things. When you can anticipate things, then you can teach others and get them out ahead of it. And when others can operate on your behalf, this is just labor leverage, but when others can operate on your behalf in an anticipatory fashion, then you can use leverage and get a bigger result. So it does increase the size of the results, but it only increases the size of the result proportionate to your skill. So if I have a high degree of mastery, leverage becomes an amplifier, not a shortcut. The result is bigger. The losses are bigger. The gains are bigger. And so it amplifies me. So the first step to leverage is I must become something that can be levered. Whether it's labor leverage, whether it's financial leverage, whether it's media leverage, this interview will only be as good as I am. If I am exceptionally talented or interesting or a good storyteller or have a lot to offer, then this interview will go very well, and the media leverage will amplify its reach, and a lot of people will be helped. If I know jack shit and I get on this interview and then you put a big horn on me and blow my message out, I just look stupid. So people that try to take the shortcuts are trying to amplify something that's not valuable. So this is the essence of using leverage, is it starts with what you become, and then it allows you to amplify your results, both good and negative. You're going to get both every time. In investing, people that work with leverage, the Ray Dalios of the world, get massive losses and way more massive wins. And then the way you have to look at it is, if I know it's going to amplify my results, then what I need to be sure of when I think about, am I becoming what I need to become? I need to be sure that my skill is at a place that my returns are asymmetrical to my losses. So I have to have far more upside. If it goes right, I get way more back. Investors would say 5x or more, but I have to know that I'm going to get massive returns relative to every dollar I could lose. That's the investor mindset. You apply it to anything else, labor leverage. I have to know I can get massively more in returns by working through a team than I could lose paying for a team if things don't go well. So no matter the form of leverage, it all comes back to what you become. It's not a shortcut. It is an amplifier. of what is real, of what your actual skill and what your results are. And then I have to wield it effectively and get an asymmetrical return relative to the losses. And so when I'm making the decision about leverage, should I use it? Where does it fit in? I'm only asking the question, what's the highest and best use of my ability? What's the highest and best use for me? Whether that's in labor, whether that's in finance, what's my highest and best use? And what that's going to help me hopefully find. Questions help direct our focus, help us find the right thing. So if I ask a good question, like what's the highest and best use of my skills? Well, now I can structure the game to win. I can find the game that I can win most at. One of the examples I give of this to people to help them conceptualize it is if you go into a casino, let's say you don't know how to play any game in the casino, and you go, I want to learn how to play a game, and I'm going to put all my effort into mastering that game. Well, you could put years into mastering slots and you're going to be down money. The math is inevitably against you. And so there are games in the casino that no matter how hard you work and how smart you are and how much input you put, the output will just be smaller. And a lot of people are playing slots in life because they haven't made the right choice about what game to play. And so we put way more effort into mastering the game we're playing than we do into choosing which game we should play. If you go master poker, you can make out like a bandit. You can make millions. And all you have to do in a game of poker where the cards are random and you can only have 3 things you can do. You can bet, you can check, you can fold. That's it. Those are your 3 choices. You got 3 choices and random cards. Random cards in front of you, random cards on the flop, random cards on the turn, random card on the river. It's all random. It's a game of total randomness. And yet, you can move the odds from random, let's say 50-50 chance of winning, to 60%. And now you're making millions of dollars. The best poker players in the world, if they're playing against someone bad, they can win 85% of the time. But if they're playing against a good player, they just have to win 55-60%. And so all you need to do is master that edge. And because the game allows for it, you can win huge. And so when I talk about problems, right? Problems are the game we're playing. How we structure the problem in life is where we're deciding which game to play. And we can structure games such that we're guaranteed to lose. We can structure games such that we're almost guaranteed to win. And so the reason I'm bringing this up when you ask me about leverage is because not all games are equal, and leverage in many cases is choosing the right game, because one of the most high leverage things I can do is with my mindset learn where do I put 1 unit of input and get much more valuable outputs. And I would suggest to most people that the first high leverage thing anyone should be doing is rethinking the rules to the game and what game they are playing. The only reason I started Solved is because it was a game that I knew that if I played and I was average at, I was going to get an above average return. That's insane. I want to be a bad surfer on a huge wave and get thrown 200 feet instead of being a great surfer on a wave that can only push me 10 feet. So I want to disproportionately put the effort into choosing the game where I win on accident and not trying to be, so good at a game where I have very little upside. Now, the real magic is when you master it and you're an amazing surfer on a 200-foot wave, and now you can go for days. So it's not to say that the skill level isn't important. It's just the highest leverage thing is starting with what game you're playing, because then every unit of skill you add gets a 10x return of output. And I say 10x, it's just an example. You don't know. It could be 1,000x, but that comes down to choosing the right game. And so before I master my skill set, I want to master choosing the right thing. So let me choose the right thing, master my skill set, and then everything gets amplified. And so whether it's labor leverage, which I think most people follow a fairly predictable path, most entrepreneurs, they usually start with either labor leverage or technology leverage, meaning, a developer, technical founder, entrepreneur is going to start with, I built code and stuff, and now I need to hire people. And someone like myself, who, even though I have technical skills, I'm more powerful on the soft skills, sales, interpersonal, and leadership side. I'm going to start with people. I'm going to bring in more people and teach them how to do what I do. And then you're going to add the other one. So now we have built tech that enables our business, and that's a form of leverage. And, the tech entrepreneur is going to add labor. And when you think about the major types of leverage, I think Naval Ravikant was the first one to kind of point out there's like 4. It's labor, technology, media, and financial. And so if you can, there's way more than that, but if you just take some major categories, and those are kind of the 4 pillars, most people start with learning labor. Some start with technology and then move to labor, but always technology and labor seem to be the first 2. I shouldn't say always. A lot of the time, those seem to be the first 2. And then that opens up either media or financial or both. And I think most people go to financial next and media last, meaning most entrepreneurs, if they start a business and they're able to hire people and teach them what to do, and so they start building a really constructive team, then they add technology. Now they're getting even bigger outcomes. And then they're like, wow, making a lot of money. Now I can invest. Now I can go play financial games that are meaningful. I can angel invest. I can get into private equity funds. I can do things that get higher returns. I can afford to take some financial swings and use money as leverage. I can make reinvestments into my business that could give me more leverage. So now I'm playing the financial leverage game. And then they get on podcasts and talk about it. Is usually kind of the 4th step. That's not everyone. It's certainly my journey, but as I've talked to entrepreneurs, I've found that it's pretty common that path is fairly consistent. And so anyone, no matter where they're at, even if you're at a job right now, because leverage is not something just for entrepreneurs. If I'm at a job, I can learn right now how to better wield labor leverage, how to get other people to do the work for me, how to get them to do the things and get the results that I need to get. And the last thing I'll say on this that is also tied back to something you originally asked. In order to use leverage, you must have the right belief set. And one of the fundamental beliefs of leverage is I have to be willing to take responsibility for things that are not my fault. And the reason this is such an important belief, right? People get scared. They're like, oh, but if I use labor leverage now, they could do something that I didn't do, but I'm on the hook for it. Yep. Oh, if I use financial leverage, it could blow up and it could cost me this. Yep. The risks are absolutely higher. And when somebody learns that is a feature, not a bug, that is desirable, not something to be scared of and avoided, that can change their entire life. Because when you are looking at that and you're saying you're scared of it and you're avoiding it, what you are doing is you're undervaluing the upside. You're mispricing the opportunity cost, essentially. So we are far better at pricing risks and thinking about what risks might cost or the impact than we are thinking about potential upside, opportunity, and growth. So most people think they're making conservative, safe decisions by overvaluing risk and undervaluing the opportunity and upside. And so when you start to get good enough to value the opportunity and the upside, now you can find where there's the asymmetry, where it's like, I'm perfectly comfortable with $1 million of risk today. If I have 10 or $20 million of upside, I wouldn't even feel bad losing $1 million if I have 10 to $20 million of upside. I made an investment in a friend's company that has been close to going out of business several times, but has pulled it out and is probably now going to be worth 20, 30, 40 million. And I own a significant portion of that company because I took a huge risk initially. I didn't do any due diligence. I gave them a very large sum of money. And it was extremely risky, but I knew I'm almost certain to lose this, but if I don't, this is 100x opportunity. And so the question was not, will I win or will I lose on this deal? The question was, if I do this deal 100 times with this person and all future scenarios play out, does he win at least 1? Does he win at least 5? Does he win 10 times? How many of those does he win? And for me, I'm like, he wins probably like 40, 50 of times at least. He wins at least half of these. Like there's half of these scenarios that he wins. And if that's the case, then my expected return on the investment is like a 50x return. But investments don't work that way. You don't get the average of all future outcomes. You just get one outcome. So it might be 0. It might be 40 million. It might be, anywhere in between. You get one outcome. But the way you want to make decisions as an investor with financial leverage is I see the asymmetry. And if I make this decision every time, I will over time get the result. And so that's a really critical concept to every single type of leverage. You want to make decisions, whether it's hiring and building people with labor leverage, whether it's financial leverage, whether it's media leverage. And is this something that if I did it 100 times or 1,000 times, what is the percentage of time that it's going to produce enough of a result? And how big is that result? And now I can come up with an expected value like we think about in poker. What's an expected value for this to make the right decision? So anyways, I've taken us all over the place around leverage because it's something I could talk about forever. Like you said, I'm just passionate about it. Obviously, I have a podcast about it. But that being said, I want to give you a chance to maybe rein me in and take me in whatever direction is the most valuable for the audience.
No, absolutely. But I love the casino example so much, by the way. That casino example of playing the right game is so important. And obviously slot being a very bad one because the odds are against yourself. One thing that is very interesting and I love what you said about this, which is this podcast going to be as good as how good I am, right? So perhaps it's this Jim Rohn understanding that if you want to have more than what you got to be better than who you are. You got to become better than who you are. And this understanding is fundamental to not only self-improvements, but productivity periods. One thing that we talk a lot as a point of leverage, which you utilize a lot, and you touch a little bit on this, but I really want to dive deeper into it, is you said something that I found very, very clever, and I think there's a scarcity around that really need to be unsolved, which is the future of AI isn't about replacing people, it's about empowering them to think bigger and achieve more, which I absolutely adore, obviously talking about leverage once again. When you're thinking about generative AI, which is one of your specialties, and how it's revolutionizing consulting, how it's revolutionizing not only the CRM systems, but also business processes, where do you see the future of consulting to be, and how the Solve.cloud obviously is encompassed within that future vision?
Yeah, so such a huge topic here. So maybe the right foundation to lay is people, I think, start by wondering, depending on who they are, what their background is, and how much exposure they have to AI. I think the first fundamental question is just like, will it replace me? Will it? And the answer is yes, it absolutely will in most stuff. And that can feel scary to people, but it doesn't need to be, because there's one outcome where AI replaces humans in every respect, and that's what I would call the dystopian outcome, which is all of a sudden there's no work to do, AI does all the work, and now what even is human life, and will the AI gods let us live? That's sort of the dystopian example. I think it's important to call that example out and understand that it's actually possible to happen. Anyone that's really deep in the technology will tell you they think that's a possibility, not a likelihood. And if it is a possibility, then why don't we spend all our time talking about it? Well, one, because it's not likely. And two, because in that world, we're going to have so many other problems as this combined species to worry about. Don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do in that scenario. In that scenario, we're all in it together trying to figure out what that means. So it's not like you're going to be the one who got put out on the corner and, everyone else has this great life. We're all going to be stuck in a hard place if that dystopian world were to come true. So knowing there's nothing we can do about it, and this is an important mental skill for everyone to develop, is being able to categorize things and scenarios into things that we actually have influence over and things we don't. In that scenario, I don't have influence. So I'm not going to put any mental exertion into trying to solve that problem. I'm going to go at least one step earlier in the process, which would be AI is doing a bunch of stuff and humans are still involved and we still have some level of purpose. In that world, what does that world look like? Because in that world, I can do something. In that world, I could have influence over what happens with AI, what happens in my life. And I'm always looking for the scenario or the step that I can get to where I have some level of influence or control. Because if you want to feel happy, you got to focus on what you can do. You cannot focus on the things that are outside of your control. It'll drive you insane because you can spend all day going in circles and what ifs, and it just destroys your emotions, your spirit, your mentality. So there's no value in it. So there is value in looking a step closer. All right. So when you go to a step closer and you think, man, we're likely headed towards at least a world where there's tons of AI working next to humans. Well, what does that vision look like? In that world, it's an extension of the internet age. All right. So when you look at the internet age, income inequality has exploded. And this is not a political statement. This is just a fact. And there's plenty of people that hypothesize why, but I've been saying for 10 years, income inequality is a simple thing to explain. And here's how I explain it. The top 0.01% own the automation. The top 1% are building the automation, and everybody else is being automated away. And that is a framework that I think makes it really easy to then decide, what do I want to be doing with my time? When I'm talking about game do I play, I want to be playing a game where I'm at least involved building the automation and ideally owning some of the automation. And you might say, well, how do I own the automation? Buy some tech stocks, buy some crypto, buy the things that will be assets in the AI era and sit on it, because now you own a little piece, even if it's only $1,000. A little piece of real estate in the world that's coming will be highly valuable later. So there's ways that you can own the automation now. All right. And to me, I think the most asymmetrical opportunity on that is crypto. The second best is tech stocks. And so that being said, that's how you in the short term could. Now, if you have access, you can angel invest in AI startups. There's a bunch of other things you could do. Granted, AI as a market is way overpriced right now. People are getting valuations that are, it's a total bubble. So it'll pop at some point. But that being said, I want to own. That's my first thing that I want to do to the maximum capability I have, depending on my income level and, disposable income. And then the second thing is, in terms of my labor and what I'm working towards, I want to work towards being in the 1%, which means I'm involved in the automating of things. So when you look at a company and you say, in any given company, as AI comes in, whose jobs are going to be the first to go? Well, fundamentally, jobs are going to change. And when they do change, the person who's going to be the most valuable is the person who knows how to wield AI, at least in their role, if not beyond their role. And so if an executive is looking at a group of 100 people, they say, oh, we got to cut this by 20% because we're more efficient now with AI. And again, this is still going to a very worst case scenario. I'm not even saying this is going to happen, because technically we have a labor shortage. So there's a lot of reason that you may not even have cuts, and companies may just pay to retrain you. There's plenty to discuss on that front, but I'm looking at the worst case scenario and saying, what can I do to ensure it's not me? So looking at the worst case scenario, if they come in to make the cuts, I'm looking at it and saying, okay, well, if I'm the one who's automating away my own job, they're going to want to keep me because I'm producing the result that they're wanting to produce, which is more efficiency. And if I know how to automate my job, I could expand and start helping automate other parts of the business. And that's going to rise me up into more senior positions and make me more valuable. So people have to not be so defensive about wanting to do what they used to do. And they have to be open to embracing the ability to automate any element of the business. And they want to be part of that solution if they want to be moving towards that 1%. Now, in terms of what we do with businesses, I think about AI through two different lenses. There's the bottom-up lens, which is each individual is going to 3 to 5x their productivity in the next few years. Like everyone is going to produce 3 to 5x more using agents and AI. And so when you know that that's what's coming, there has to be an effort, an organizational effort to train and empower people to use AI tools, whether that's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or, Perplexity. There's all these tools that are getting better and better and that are going to get more and more proactive. The general consensus right now is that LLMs have more or less are starting to crest in terms of their knowledge capability, but their to execute on that knowledge is going to keep growing exponentially. So now instead of just giving you an answer, they're going to be able to take action as an agent. And this is an important term for the audience to understand. AI refers to the thinking, and that could be a lot of things. That could be machine learning and predictive models, and LLMs are the most popular new one, generative AI. But that also is an umbrella for robotics and for agents. Robotics would be the physical world labor. Agents would be digital labor, would be people, imaginary AI people that take actions. So if you want to know what that's going to look like, Salesforce is actually leading the way on this with Agentforce. They just came out with Agentforce 3 months ago, and then this last week, Agentforce 2.0, a whole nother release 3 months later. Their speed on this is really fast. So in terms of especially big enterprise or larger companies, you're going to see Salesforce absolutely lead the way on this. And so what agents do is you give them a set of instructions and you say, hey, look, this is what I need you to do. You're going to be a RevOps assistant. And what I want you to do is go look at all the emails for our salespeople. And I want you to make sure all their opportunities and everything are updated in the system. And I want you to look at all the opportunities and make sure the forecasts are updated. And I want you to find anybody in here that we haven't reached out to and generate an email and prep it as a draft for the salesperson to be able to send to them. And I want you to automatically start outreach on any older prospects. And when you get to the point, set an appointment for them to meet with the salesperson. And so all these kinds of things, right? They're going to be taking action as digital labor next to a human. And so if your job today consists of a lot of stuff that can be easily replaced, you're going to get replaced by digital labor. And so the question is, how do I move to the skills, the complementary human skills that would work well with digital labor? So in sales, it means BDR roles are going to be almost, I would say, extinct in the next 5 years. You're not going to have BDRs because AI is too effective at it. You're going to have skilled salespeople that are still closing the deal working with digital labor for BDR type stuff. In technology, a lot of the entry-level roles are going to dry up because digital labor is going to replace all of those. Basic administration and all that, you're going to need to get to a level where you can audit and hold it accountable and teach it and tell it what to do and interact, design architecture, keep it from going off the rails, keep your company from having a massive bill because your AI digital labor went crazy, did all this stuff, and now you have this huge bill because it's all usage pricing. And so it uses all these credits and racks up this huge bill, and your CEO's like, we can't afford this. What are we doing? So these are the roles that become more valuable. The human skills, the ability, because even today, the bottleneck is the human side. People are so worried about what AI will replace in the future. It could replace you probably today in a bunch of things. The problem is AI today can't take accountability and doesn't have any legal responsibility. So because you can't make it accountable, it has to work next to a human, and the human has to take responsibility, which means you're bottlenecked by the human's ability to adopt the AI, use the AI, and audit it, make sure it's all good. And so the human is the reason we're not using more AI today, not the tech. The tech's already ahead of us and accelerating, so it will get further ahead of us. And so if you're the human that can adapt to change quickly and can go learn the new tools, can learn how to work next to it, can be suggesting to your executives how you can implement it and stay relevant, or can be bringing in a company like SOLVD.cloud to come sit down and do an analysis and show you how it could be used. Well, now you can get ahead because you're able to actually know what your role looks like in an AI world, in an agent digital labor world. And so that's where most companies are stuck. And so you've got the bottom up, which is 3 to 5xing productivity on an individual basis. And then you have top down. And top down is where you use AI at a strategic level. Top down is where you say, how do we get AI into our product in a meaningful way? Or how do we re-engineer our back-end systems to be way more automated? And how do we get deeper insights using AI? So top down requires a thoughtful, guided approach. It's a much bigger investment, but it produces massive assets. It's AI as an asset in the organization. It's not just a digital labor doing certain things here and there. It's a thoughtful approach that requires process design, knowing how the processes are going to work, data design, where's our data going to live? Because AI, one of the core inputs of AI is data and energy. That's what it needs in order to do what it does. So you've got to have data that is valuable, that it can use to produce valuable outcomes for your business. So if your business isn't producing data and or storing it in the right way, that's going to be a core thing you need. If you don't have your systems integrated such that AI can access them, that's going to be a core thing you need. So the data structure and the system structure as far as integrations, the process structure, and the human structure. What do humans need to know in order to interact with and work cohesively with the AI? That all has to be planned out at an executive level, and dollars have to be invested to create those assets that allow you to be an AI first business in the next 3 to 5 years. That's the top down solution that we offer. So we help executives go top down. We help companies implement bottom up, which is much simpler. All it requires is careful policy execution in terms of writing an AI policy that is current and makes sense and empowers your employees, then training and educating them and getting them involved in helping to create the increases in productivity. So it's a very groundswell, grassroots type effort, but it needs some direction in order to start, because 50, 60% of employees that don't have approved use of AI are using it anyways. So a lot of these companies just have risk that people are not using AI and they don't even know the tools and they don't even know what's going on. So you've got to empower them and give them the tools, make sure they're company-owned assets, make sure that they're not data sharing back into the models, make sure that you're doing it the right way and empowering the team so that you can actually get the increase in productivity and not open up new risk vectors for your company. So that's the bottom up. Much simpler, but very, very important and needs to be acted on immediately. Top down, that could take a year or two. It's more strategic and it takes a little more thought and planning and architecture and design. And so we answer those questions for the business so that they can then step forward, because literally 3 to 5 years from now, if you haven't done everything I just said in your business, you're out of business. That's where you're going to be. You will not be able to compete with digital labor. I think there's a great demo that was just done for the Agentforce 2.0 release that if people haven't seen, they should go watch with Mark Benioff. He walks you through. You can start it's an hour and a half long demo. Start at minute 52, because that's where they really start the hands-on demo. Mark does a bunch of, marketing and everything before that and sales pitching. But if you just get to go to minute 52 on that and you start watching, that demo will show you what's coming. And it shows, it really shows you what's happening. It's demos of what Salesforce is doing right now and at their own company. And we're doing it in our company. We've automated away basically all project management, and we're still early on. There's a bunch more we're going to do to make that even cooler. We are getting rid of so much of the middle management busy work to where AI is doing all of that so that we can operate with less middle managers over larger groups of people successfully. All our back-end processes are getting tighter. We've always been heavy on automation because that's the theme of our business, but we're converting it from structured automation, which is, business logic, programmatic, this is how it works, to wherever needed, unstructured agentic automation, digital labor automation, where they can make more decisions and be more analytical and provide insights. And so that you'll still have both in businesses, but there's going to be a lot more of this agentic, automation. That's going to be so important, learning how to use that digital labor. So anyways, I could go on forever about agents, but
incredible. No, this is incredible stuff, and truly, a legacy is in what you leave behind. It's the life you impact along the way. Spencer Lowe, it's been an incredible episodes of nothing but golden nuggets and insights. Thank you so much for being on the Meaningful Podcast, and I would absolutely adore if you can share your last thoughts with our audience, please.
Yeah, I would leave you with some insights that I've gotten from two mentors that have meant the world to me, which is Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins. If you haven't heard them, I recommend you learn as much as you can from those guys. But the things that have meant the most to me on this journey is, one, success is not something you can chase after or achieve. It's something that it's something that is attracted to you by the person you become. And I heard that from Jim Rohn when I was 15 years old, and it has dramatically impacted every facet of my life. And sometimes I can feel hard of like, well, what does that mean that I have to become something? And so if you don't know, listen to Jim Rohn. That's a good start. Listen to Tony Robbins. That's a good start. They'll teach you how to do the work on yourself. But it means stopping looking external. I say this, it's the most valuable belief I teach anybody, and it's so obvious, but you have to be willing to take responsibility for things that are not your fault. And so when you tell yourself the truth, when you don't lie to yourself, you say, look, this is what's actually, I can take responsibility. Maybe it's as simple starting as you delegated something to someone at work, they didn't get it back to you on time. Instead of saying, oh, I didn't get it done on time because they didn't get it back to me, your story has to be, I didn't set clear enough expectations with them. I didn't follow up early enough. I didn't support them to make sure they met the deadline. Yes, they should have had it back on time, but you should have made sure it happened. And the more that you expand your capacity to get results beyond what is just your fault, you can get results based on other people's work. You can get results based on financial leverage. You can get results based on media leverage. You can get results way beyond what is just your fault. You will profit at levels that you can't even realize right now. You will make more money. You will have more meaning and fulfillment. Everything happens at a higher level. And those two things are not the same thing, but they can go together if you let them, which is the science of achievement and making money and being successful and the art of fulfillment. And that is what we're all really after. Nothing you get is going to make you happy. It's when you become this, You're going to get everything you wanted to get, but you're going to be happy because you're going to find fulfillment along the way. That's why I wanted to be on the podcast. I love the mission. And that's where true meaning is. It has nothing to do with what you get, what checkbox you check, what title you have, what, I built this with this many employees. Don't get lost in all that. Just become the right person. All that will happen for you, but you'll find meaning along the way, purpose, and you'll see a higher power in what you're doing. And that's where you get to feel deep gratitude, you get to feel deep joy, you get to feel deep connection with people. And that's durable. What you become is durable. You get to keep that.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.